besties, welcome to the Tallulah tutorial. Say that 10 times fast. Tallulah tutorial. Anyway, this tutorial is geared towards the kit that I have available in my Etsy shop. Now there is a Tallulah pattern that you can download, again in my Etsy shop. You can download the pattern and sew it. It actually comes in a couple of different lengths, even a full dress. Pick your own fabrics and go from there. But for those of you who are wanting to start with the kit, where you get the fabric, the instructions, everything pre-printed for you, you're in the right place. We are going to go through this step by step. I'm going to show you what you get in your kit, and then we're just going to work through the whole process. When I sewed this top, it took me right at about just under an hour. So it should be a pretty quick process. So let's get started. First of all, in your kit, you're going to get your instructions. If you're watching, pardon me, if you're watching this video, you may not even need this, but I've included it in there. So if you want to look back and double check something, this has all the written instructions, all the diagrams, some room for notes if you need them for later on. So you've got that. Okay. You will also get your two cuts. You'll have two separate cuts of fabric. This fabric is 100% cotton double gauze. It is a lightweight, comfortable fabric. When you receive your fabric, it may feel a bit stiff. Don't worry about that. And please, please, please do not pre-wash your fabric. I am a fabric pre-washer, but with this, trust me, you do not want to pre-wash it. When I lined this out, I accounted for not only your seam allowances, but also for that shrinkage and that squishiness that we're going to get from this fabric when we wash it. So again, do not pre-wash. When you cut, you're simply going to cut right along the pieces. Don't worry about seam allowances. Don't worry about, just cut. Everything's been done for you. Don't panic. Just cut. So anyway, back to our pieces. This is the front panel, and you can see everything is labeled. High-low front, high-low top front. Obviously, there's our girl. At the bottom of this panel, we have our, my view is not very wide, is it, guys? Sorry. Anyway, we've got our sleeves. Here's a sleeve, here's a sleeve. You have this diagonal piece coming down the middle, which is going to be your neck bias binding. And again, it's all labeled here for you, so there's no guesswork. That's the front panel. The back panel is roughly the same. Let me get this all unfolded here. It has the back of your top, and again it says high-low top back. So you've got your back here, okay, all your words, and then down below that you're going to have a couple of strips, and these are going to be your hem bands that go with the bottom of the front and back. So you've got a back hem band, a front hem band, and then you've got two little bitsy hem bands, which are going to go for your sleeve cuffs. This top is about a 3/4 length sleeve with a cuff. You can roll it up, leave it down. Again, we talked about this being the double cotton gauze. So let me show you on the finished top. You can see the difference once it's washed. And again, this is why I don't pre-wash, just because this little bit stiffer fabric is way easier to work with than once it's washed. Once it's washed, it's so soft and it's so wrinkly, and you don't get as straight of stitches. So, but once you do wash it, this is what you get. And I love this texture. I love the feel of this. So a few things to point out and how we're going to sew this. we are going to have a few raw edges just to give it some flair. Now on these raw edges, if you choose to fold that fabric under and make it a finished edge, that's up to you. I'm going to show you everything here with these few raw edges. So on the inside you do have finished edges. Outside you're going to have a little raw edge around your neckline. You're going to have one around your sleeve cuff, again only on the outside. And then again at your bottom bands, and I've got strings hanging off because I've only washed this one time and I haven't really trimmed everything. But you can see on the outside you get this little bitty raw edge there, but on the inside you have a really clean finish. And then this is your back, the back band. Again, you've got the little raw edge. Okay, so the only other thing I guess I want to show you before we start is you are going to have, we've obviously got the high-low hem, and you've got this little vent here on the side just for ease of wear. Okay? Any questions so far? How are we doing? Are we ready to start? I'm ready. All right, so let's move you out of the way. And our first step is simply going to be to cut out all of our pieces. So I'm going to start doing that. You can grab your fabric and start doing that. And then we will be ready to start sewing. You should be all cut out now. One thing I wanted to mention, if I were sewing a kit that someone else had created, I get a little meticulous about my parts and pieces. I want to know which part is which and make sure they're labeled and I don't confuse one part for another. If you are like me, you can cut out the labels and pin them onto your pieces. Now, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. All of the pieces in this pattern are the same. If it says right sleeve, guess what? It's the same as the left sleeve. I kind of just labeled them again because I know some of us want to have labels. I like labels on things. I don't like labels on people at all. But I like labels on things. I want to know which is which. But anyway, and also to make sure that I got 2 sleeves on the panel because, you know, that's always a good thing. But if you look at the sleeve pieces, they're exactly the same. So whichever one goes on which side isn't going to matter. Your hem bands, again, it's the exact same thing. Right and left, top and front, doesn't matter. Sleeve bands, same thing. And so really you only have a couple of pieces and you're going to be able to see which piece is which. Obviously your front and back, you've got one bias band, your arm bands, which are small, your hem bands, and then your sleeves. That's it. So labels probably aren't necessary, but if it makes you feel comfortable, you have that option. So let's start sewing. And to begin with, we're going to start with our front and one of our hem bands. To lay your front down with the wrong side facing you, and along this bottom edge, you are going to lay your hem band down with the wrong side facing you as well. Okay, so all you're matching is this lower raw edge. I wish I had a wider camera view, guys, but I hope you can see what we're doing here. All right, so that's that. Line it up along the lower raw edge. Throw you some pins in there if you prefer. All the way across. Almost poked myself. Like so. And we are going to take this to the machine and we are going to stitch. I forgot to mention, all of our seams are going to be a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Okay, so stitch you a seam right down here. All right, our hem band is sewn on. So what we're going to do now is fold this down. We're going to keep this seam allowance going down and we're just going to fold this over, okay? And then we're going to press that. And I like to press it from both sides. So I'm going to give it a little press from this side. Right here, like so. And then we're going to turn this over. And now I'm going to make sure that this seam allowance is pointing downward. And it is, but I'm going to give it one more little press right there. And now what we're going to do, get the iron out of the way, is we're going to fold this piece upward, okay? And now what you want to do is, this is where we're going to leave that raw edge, okay, just right along here. So when you lay this, let me get a part where maybe I'm gonna, let me see if I can zoom you guys in. Hold please. Oh, wrong way. Okay, so you can see your seam. This is our raw edge. We are going to lay this just up over it, maybe 1/4 of an inch, so that when I sew, I'm going to be sewing right along that seam. I can feel it through here. I'm going to sew right along that seam, but I'm going to have some fabric up here that's going to fray, okay? So let me zoom you back out. There we go. Okay, so pin this in place, just starting at one side. And now when you stitch this, you are definitely going to need to use a zigzag stitch or a decorative stitch that crosses back and forth. You see a lot of times I'll use that like quilting stitch. Excuse me. I'll reach over here and show you. Well, it's been washed, so I don't know. I guess you can still see. If you can see the little back and forth, because you want this to fray, but you don't want it to completely tear out. And that back and forth, like of the zigzag, it's going to grab a bundle of stitches from your fabric, and that's going to prevent it from just like going crazy and fraying till it's nothing. So, all right, so pin your band down and stitch you a seam, stitch line, whatever you want to call it. Sew this right along here, okay? Okay, I want to show you a little something about sewing this hem down where we just pinned it on. So this is our right side, and we folded this up over our seam and pinned it down. Now, when you're sewing, you can feel that little bump in there and try to keep that little bump in the center of your foot. But there's also an easier way. Let me get my machine to the right stitch. There we go. If you run your piece from the back side, you know that your excess up here comes over this seam by about 1/4 of an inch. So if you sew from the back side right along where these two meet, you're going to get a perfect seam on the front and you're going to get a perfect seam on the back. In other words, your zigzag is going to cross right over this instead of being wonky and wavy by trying to guess from the front with feeling. So I will show you this. Here we go. All right, so we have our front hem band in place. We've got it zigzag down, clean edge on the back, raw edge on the front. So you want to repeat this process for the back. And through the magic of television, voila, we have it done. So repeat the same process there with your back piece and your back band, and you're going to end up with something that looks like this. Okay. The next step we are going to do, let me show you on the front since it's smaller. I think it'll fit in the screen better. These side edges, like from the, I hope you can see this. This is our underarm right here. The side edge from the underarm to the hem. We want to finish these edges, okay? From underarm to hem here, on that side, and then again on the left side, just from underarm to hem. finish that edge. If you have a serger, go ahead and just serge down that. If you don't have a serger, don't worry. Sorry, my voice is going out. If you don't have a serger, don't worry. Just zigzag it, and then you're gonna do that for the front and the back. So here's my back piece. Again, I'm gonna go from, here's my underarm. I'm gonna go from here to here. Just zip that right down and finish those edges. Okay, so both sides. Underarm to hem down here. There we go, hem. Okay, so get those edges finished off. All right, so we now have our sides finished off, and you can see here all, try that again. You can see all I did was just serge down that edge. And again, if you don't have a serger, just zigzag back and forth. Just run your zigzag stitch down that edge, okay? You just want to prevent that from fraying inside your garment when you wash it. You want this to last. All right, so moving forward, take your front and lay it right side up, and then you're going to take your back piece and lay it wrong side up, or where the two right sides are facing. And what we're going to do now is we're going to work on these shoulder seams, okay? So we're going to line up our back and our front here at the shoulder seam, like so. And we're going to give it a little pin. Pin you. And pin you. And we'll give you one more pin in the middle. Okay, and then we're going to do it on this side as well. Line up everything here, like so. I'm trying not to bump y'all with my head so much as I'm like ducking down. All right. Get it all pinned down. We're going to stitch these two shoulder seams with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. We are going to finish off that either with a serge or a zigzag stitch, again, because you don't want to leave these raw edges inside your garment, or over time it's just going to fall apart. So stitch, finish, and we'll meet back in a second. All right, so here we are. We have our front sewn to our back at the shoulder seams. I have run my stitch, and then I've also finished my edges with the serger, and again, you can zigzag. So what you're going to do now is turn your piece right side out, or open it up as such. And what I like to do, this next step is optional. If you are happy with this, you can leave it exactly like that and be done. I like to top stitch. And so what I do is I will open this shoulder seam out, and I am pushing this seam allowance towards the front of the shirt, and I'm going to give it a press. Now this shoulder has some curve to it, so you can see it's not completely flat, but that's okay. So I'm just going to give it a little press, like so. And you can see we get that curve in there, but that's, I mean, it looks like it's curving forward. It's actually curving like this around your shoulder. So once I give it a press, let me do this side real quick. Give them a press, and then I'm going to turn it over and do the same thing from the back side, just to be sure that my seam allowance is headed towards the front. And you can see that it is. Actually, I'm good with that. And then what I'm going to do is I am going to take this to the machine, and I am going to sew. Now my seam allowance is on this side, so I'm going to sew me a stitch. I'm going to run it parallel with this seam, but I'm going to sew it right down here. So let me show you what that looks like. Okay, so I have the front of my shirt here, the back of my shirt here. This is my shoulder seam. And you can see underneath I have my seam allowance, and I've got it pressed towards the front, and that's the side I'm going to be sewing on. And so what I like to do, I've got this little notch in my foot, and you can use whatever you want as a marker, but I've got this little notch in my foot, so I'm going to make this line go right into that little notch. And then my needle is, I've got it positioned over so that it's going to stitch right along here, catching the edge. Make sure that your needle, when it comes down, you can even roll your needle down and make sure that it's gonna, like I can feel there's the edge of my seam allowance, and my needle is well within that. So I'm good there. So I'm just gonna run this stitch straight down. You can see what that looks like there. I like the look of this. I think it gives it a more finished look. And then the other thing that I like about it is underneath, your seam allowance here is tacked down. It's not going to be flopping back and forth. Okay, so I'm going to repeat that on the other side. They also sell, and I have one, I didn't put it on here right now because I wanted to show you don't really need it, but they do have a foot that has a little guide on it, and you can set that little guide right in this seam and then adjust your needle. But for these short seams, and if you feel comfortable sewing your straight lines, just keep watching. Don't watch where your needle's going, watch where this seam is going, and just have that seam keep going straight into whatever you're using as your guide point. All right, so now we have our shoulder seams finished. The next thing we are going to do is attach the sleeves. So what you want to do is get your sleeve hole opened out. Okay, so this is the back, this is the front. It is not going to matter. Again, your sleeves are symmetrical, so we don't have to worry about back of the sleeve, front of the sleeve, anything like that. If you'll notice on your sleeve in the middle, there is a little spot right there, that little white spot. That is the center of the sleeve. Okay, so with right sides facing, you are going to pin that little white spot with the center of your shoulder seam. Okay, now these sleeves, you're going to have to ease them around again, because you can see here we have this curve coming this way and this curve coming this way, so they're opposites. One's convex and one's concave. I think concave, convex, I don't remember. Anyway, one's one and one's the other. They're opposing curves, so you are going to have to do some easing. The way I like to do that, let me move this up a bit for you. We're going to work on one side at a time. So I have my center pinned down. It's not going anywhere. I'm going to take this edge and I'm going to match it up to here, because in the end, that's where we're going to want it to be, right? So I'm going to match it up right there and pin it. And then the next thing I do is I go back to the center up here, and I just kind of work my way down a little bit, maybe about 3 inches, like so, because the top of the shoulder is kind of not flat, but more flat than the underarm curves. So I come down a little bit and I place me a pin. Then what I like to do is hold these 2 pins and just kind of pull. And you can see that when I pull, my curves are wanting to come together. Okay, so I'm going to pull this fabric up a little bit so they're closer in line, like so, and give it another pull. And sometimes this is weird, but sometimes I will grab it with my pinky so that I have these to use. So when I pull, what is it? You got to have dexterity. Is that the word? But then I can grab this center and I know that's lined up. Anyway, okay, and then I would just work my way in, you know, just kind of pinching and lining it all up. And then we'll go down here, and because you can see, you know, you got curve and curve, and we want them to be lined up. So again, I just pinch and pull, and then just kind of pull this up into place, grab it, and pin it. I find this to be it seems really awkward with your hands, But I find if I start, say if I just start at the center and start trying to go all the way down, I end up stretching one of them out, because since these are curves, they're on the bias and they've got more stretch to them. And so then I get down here to the end and I either have I have a lot of sleeve hanging off, or I have a lot of the body hanging off. I'm never lined up. So that's why I do my center point, my end point, and then ease everything in between. Okay, so, and then I'm just going to repeat that process for this half of the sleeve. Okay, so my sleeve is now pinned down. I'm going to take it to the machine. I am going to sew it. I am then going to go back and edge finish it with my serger or zigzag. I am then going to do the same process that I just did on the shoulder seams, where I'm going to press my seam allowance towards the body of the garment, not towards the sleeve, but towards the garment. And then I'm going to run that same top stitch down it. Okay? And then you're going to repeat that for the second sleeve. All right, so I have my sleeve on the bottom. I have my top fronts on the top here. The reason I do that is the sleeve underneath has a flatter surface. And this is where we did a lot of our easing. So you can see how this is all wrinkly on top. I want to be able to watch this, okay, as I sew, because I don't want to get big puckers in there or anything like that, okay? So I am just going to maneuver with my fingers when I need to make sure that this top section, and this gauze is so thin sometimes it's hard to get a hold of. But I'm just going to keep picking it up and kind of moving it around as I go so that this stays flat. I don't get any wrinkles in it. Okay? This to the serger, and I'm going to edge finish this raw edge, and then I am going to press this seam to the main, going towards the body of the garment. Like this is my shoulder seam, this is my sleeve. Press this towards the body of the garment and then turn it over, and I'm going to top stitch that down just like we did on the shoulders. And then we're going to repeat all of that for the second sleeve because you have two arms. Alrighty, we are starting to look like a shirt. We have our neck hole, we have our shoulder seams, we have our arm sleeves sewn down. I've got everything top stitched. Again, all of that top stitching is optional. If you don't want to mess with that, you certainly don't have to. I think if you try it, you're gonna like it in the end, and it just adds that extra bit of stability and what's the word I'm looking for? Durability to your garment. I spend a lot of time sewing clothes. And so when I make something, I want it to last. I want to be able to wear it for years and years and years. So that's why I take those little extra steps. Turn your garment wrong side out. Let me turn it around this way. Give it a little shake. Shake a shake. And all right, so what we are going to be working on now is the underarm and the side seam. Okay, so I have the back of my garment on the table. I have the front of my garment on top. And everything's right sides together, so we're inside out. I am going to line up the underarm section of my sleeve and pin it. And again, this gauze is stretchy, as you can feel working with it, and especially around curves like this, you're going to get a lot of stretch. You can easily stretch that fabric out of shape. So anytime I'm going to be pinning a long line, I'm going to pin at the beginning point. I'm going to find a point in between, such as my seam lines. I'm going to want them to match up. I don't want to stretch. See, I can stretch that way down, and then when I sew things together, my seams are going to be wonky. I don't want that. So I'm going to lay those seams directly on top of each other so that I know that I'm not stretching one over the other. Now see, I'll stretch that out a bit. But again, this gauze, since it's such a loose weave, it's going to fluctuate in and out pretty easily. So there we go. Finish pinning. And around any curves, if you're worried about that, the more pins you use, the more it's going to hold everything in place, so that you don't end up puckering or stretching along those curves. All right, that's probably overkill on the pins, but you have it there. Now we're going to move on down to this side seam edge, okay? And again, this is the back side of my shirt. This is the front side of my shirt. So this is where we have the high-low. So we have this front ending before this back ends, okay? Which is fine. That's what we want. We want that high-low. So what I'm going to do is, again, without stretching, I'm carefully going to lay this front on the back, matching up this seam here, okay? And I'm going to start pinning that down. 2, 3. Now, for this vent opening, what I like to do, this is the top edge right here of our, let me move this up a bit. This is the top edge of our hem band. Now I want my vent to come about 2 inches above that, okay? So I want this to be able to flap open. So you can take your ruler and you can measure 2 inches. I'm gonna say that's 2 inches. I'm happy with that. There we go. So as I come down sewing, I'm gonna stop at this last pin. And in the instructions, any of you new folks, if there's ever a word that I use, like top stitching, back stitching, any word that I use that you go, oh, I'm not sure what that is. And sometimes I use the wrong word, so, you know, forgive me for that. But if I ever say something and you don't understand, feel free to message me here. Feel free to message me on Messenger. I will try to get back to you just as quick as I can to explain anything that you may not fully understand. Don't hesitate to reach out, okay? So that's this side. Now what I do want to show you, I'm going to go ahead and pin the other side. I'm not going to take as much time to do that, but I'm going to roughly pin this other side, and then I'm going to show you what I do. In fact, I'm going to pin that part. I'm going to pin my seam, because I want to make sure that my right side and left side, like where I'm going to stop sewing over here, I want to make sure that it's the same on this side. I don't want it like hanging at an angle. So let me pin this underarm seam there. That's maybe tricky to show you, but so I'm laying my top onto my back, just as I did before. Let me move this up some. And then I am going to fold this side that I already pinned over that, just to visually see. And let me look at my camera. I can't even see you guys. Oh, you're not seeing me either. That's why. Now you can. So I'm going to bring this side over, line up my bottom edges, and I'm going to leave it offset just so I can see where I'm at. And that, I hope you can see that. Let's see. So you can see now, I'm doing this in an angle, you guys. There we go. Okay, so my bottom edges line up, my stitching for the hemband lines up, and then as we go under here, this hemband is matching up with that, so that's good. And then I can see this is where I put my pin to stop stitching, so I'm going to put a pin right here to stop stitching on that side. That way my two sides are going to be symmetrical. There we go. So again, this is right side, left side, or right side, left side, but they are going to be, I'm going to stop stitching at the same height. My bands are going to be even horizontally. Okay, hope that made sense. So I'm going to finish pinning this. I am going to stitch both of these underarm side seams, and then we're going to come back and talk about how we're going to handle this vent. Okay, so I have sewn both my side seams, and then my sleeve up here was still had that raw edge, so I did serge that, or zigzag, just to finish that edge. I'm going to open our shirt out where we can see this side seam. Okay, so front of my shirt, back of my shirt, underarm here, and then our tails down here. What we're going to do is we are going to press this seam open. Okay, and you don't have to go all the way up the underarm because we're just going to be stitching down below, unless you decide you want to edge finish all of it, and by all means you go right ahead. I mean edge finish, top stitch. See, there I go using the wrong word. Always like to tuck these tails inside just so that they don't, if I just cut them off, I'm always afraid they're gonna like come unstitched. Again, durability. So what I'm doing is on the edges of the hem bands, I'm folding in that 1/2 inch that I have on my seam allowance here as well. And then that's for the front, and then our back has the longer flap. Let me try to move some of, there we go. Let me do it like that, maybe you can see better. So this is the front of my vent, and it's not saying press down really good, but I pressed it. So it's the seam open, press down the front of the vent. I mean, I guess I could stick a pin in there and just to hold it in place like so. And then for the back of the vents, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to press it over like so, all the way down. Probably off the screen now. Tuck my little thread tail in, press him over like so. Okay, so that's what you want to have. You want your seam allowance pressed open at the side seam, and then the edges of the vents pressed open as well. Okay, and what we're going to do now is we are simply going to stitch right up this edge here. And now I'm going to stitch right on top of my serging, again, because I don't want floppy things inside, and that's going to keep me pretty well at the same distance from this folded edge. Like, you don't want your seam being all wonky. But I'm just going to stitch right up this serged edge. When I get here to the top, you can see right where my stitching stopped. I'm going to go a little bit above that, maybe 1/4 of an inch, maybe 1/2 of an inch above that, and then I'm going to go across, and then I'm going to come back down here. Okay, and that's going to sew that flap in place, that vent in place. Okay, and then repeat that for the second. All right, so I'm going to sew the vent down and starting at the back. So this is the long portion of the vent. And again, like I said, I'm just going to stitch right down my my serging, like the middle of my serge line. So here we go. And I'm slowing down as I get to that V. I'm going to slow down because I'm going to go just past it, like I said, about a ½ inch. Like to there. I'm not going to take my needle out. My needle is down inside the fabric. So if your machine has the ability to stop with the needle in the fabric, that's fine. If not, go ahead and turn your wheel and make sure that your needle is down in your fabric. Raise your presser foot because you don't want to lose your spot. So raise your presser foot, and then you're just going to make a turn. Okay, just like that. Lower our presser foot back down, and now we're going to stitch across to this other side. Like that. Keeping our needle down, raise our presser foot, give it another turn, like so. Lower our presser foot, and now we're just going to come right down here. All right, you should have both of your side vents done, and they should look something like this. You can see you've got your stitching going up, coming across and back down. So then from your underside, you don't have anything that's gonna flop out. Okay, side vents done. Now we are going to move on to the sleeve cuffs. All right, first thing you're gonna do is take your sleeve cuff with right side facing. You are going to fold it in half, and you're gonna stitch this short end right here. Okay. Sorry, it's the train again. Anyway, stitch the short end, edge finish this edge, and then we're gonna pin it to the sleeve. Do that, go ahead and do that for both of your All right, so I've got my cuffs sewn. We're gonna turn our top inside out. All right. So we have our sleeve, we have our cuff, we have our seams here. What we're going to do is we are going to slide this cuff up over the sleeve. So that's going to put the right side of the cuff facing the wrong side of the sleeve. Okay, I'm just gonna stick my hand in there. And you are going to want to match up the seam of the sleeve to the seam of the cuff. Put me a little pin there. Blunk. And then we're just going to, this is so hard to show you guys on camera. I'm just basically gonna pin it all the way around. Kind of make sure when you first put this on, again, you're gonna have some give because you're on stretchy fabric, but just make sure that you're lined up inside like so, okay? So I'm going to pin this all the way around, and then lining up these raw edges. This sleeve is on a slant. It is meant to be that way. The cuff is not. So again, you're going to do a little bit of work here just to kind of line everything up. Okay, there's that side. I usually just do, I think 4 pins is usually sufficient to kind of hold everything till I sew it down. All right, that's it. So we're gonna go ahead and sew this seam all the way around, and I'll show you how to do that on the. Okay, so my machine table does have where you can remove this section. Oh, I hope you can see that. There we go. This section will remove off, and you can put your sleeve around here. But I don't always like to, sorry about that loud noise. I don't like to always do that. It just takes time that I don't think I need to take. So with everything wrong side out, just like we pinned it. And I always start at my seams. I don't know if it matters, but I like to do that. This is all you're gonna do. You're going to hold it just like this up under, and then you're gonna turn. Now you gotta remember to turn your fabric as you go, because you're gonna be sewing in a circle. But that's an easy way to sew like a small circle area. And here we go. One seam that you don't have to finish off, like you don't need to zigzag or serge, because it's going to be enclosed here in just a minute. You'll see how that's going to work. Okay, so get both of your sleeve bands sewn on. Okay, so now with both of your sleeve bands sewn on, you're going to pull them down like so. And again, you want the seam allowance going outwards, okay, like so towards the band. You want it going that way. And so just kind of feel in there, make sure everything's going that way. Give it a little press on this side. Flop it over, give it a little press there. Quickly do the other sleeve, and then we're going to turn everything right side out after we finish this. Y'all, we are nearing the end. How are you doing? Are you hanging in there with me? I hope so. I hope I'm able to demonstrate things in a way that make it easy and fun and not stressful. Alright, so turn everything right side out. Like, come on, come on, come on. Like so. And this area here, let me trim some strings. We're gonna treat this just like we did this bottom band section. And what I mean by that is, let me press that up just a bit. Okay, what I mean by that is we're going to fold this, I got more strings, up over our sleeve like so, and we are going to have this raw edge come just past our seam about 1/4 inch. Okay, so just like we did on the band and on the hem band. So, God, here I am making sure I just start working, and I'll pull everything in really close, and I'm like, nope, hold it out here so you can see. So anyway, just cover that by about 1/4 inch. Put you a pin, and then I'll go to the top. Again, when I pin, I don't ever go just straight. I go from one section to the center of the opposite side, and then kind of work my way around. Did you ever, when I was a little kid, I always stayed outside with my dad in his garage, and so I always remember when he was tightening the lug nuts on the tires, you didn't go in a circle. You always went this one, and then this one, and then this one, and then this one. You kind of like made a star pattern. And so that's kind of how I treat these, because if we go all in one circle, we're going to tend to twist that fabric in that direction. So I'm going to go top, bottom, and then I'm going to go side to side. That way I keep everything, I don't get anything shifted. Alright, so I guess I'll put one more on this side. And then, keeping my sleeve just like this, and just like we did on the machine to sew this small circle, I'm going to sew the inside, again, like we did on the band. I'm going to run me a zigzag. Now be sure to use a zigzag. Run me a zigzag right along this line here, and then that's going to catch this raw edge. Well, it's going to more than catch it. We're going to have some excess hanging over, but we know that we're going to stitch it down with a zigzag, okay? So do that for both of your sleeves, and all we have left is to bind the neck. Alrighty, our sleeve bands are done. So you can see we've got our little zigzag with our raw edge. When we wash this, we're probably gonna have to trim some of these. On the inside, we have our kind of smooth finish. Sleeves are done. Now we are ready to finish the neck. So the first thing you're gonna wanna do is, let's turn our little shirt inside out, like so. And I should have marked it, and I apologize for not marking it, but I didn't, so sorry. On the next kits, I'll try to remember to make a marking at the back center neck. Line up your shoulder seams, pinch so you find the back center or center of your back neck line. Stick a pin there, like so. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our binding, and I'm gonna go just past, like maybe a quarter, half inch past that pin, okay? And I am going to make sure I'm not pinning all the way through the front, but I'm gonna start pinning. Now, you'll notice I didn't pin this, and I'll tell you why here in just a second. And to be quite honest, I don't pin this all the way around. Most people do, so and the instructions tell you go ahead and pin it down. I don't pin it. I'm just gonna sew it. But the main thing is that this is my center point, and I am not gonna stitch right here just yet. I'm gonna start stitching about, what is that, about 2 inches away at my first pin. Okay, so let's go to the machine, and I'm gonna show you how I stitch this binding on. All right, so this is where we were. Okay, this is our pin that's at the center back. This is our binding. This is our first pin where we connected. Okay, now to make this easier at the machine, I'm gonna turn it right side out. So hold please. Okay, now we're back. My shirt is turned right side out so that I can kind of work inside the neck here like this. Again, this is my center back pin. This is my binding. It reaches just past the center back pin. But again, I'm not going to start stitching in here yet. I'm going to start at this first pin that I put in. Okay. And let me get my straight stitch on my machine. Okay. Get situated here. Hold on, I have to sneeze. Excuse me. Okay. Whew. So I have my binding, and I've just kind of got it bundled up here, and I'm going to line it up as I go. Okay. So a mat. All right, here we go. Okay, as I get to the next point, I'm just going to kind of bring my shirt around. Do it like this. I just kind of bring my shirt around, and then I'm going to lay the binding matching these raw edges. Okay, every little bit I'm just going to stop, realign, keep going. And now don't tug on this again, because you've got curves here. If you run out of fabric here, just shift everything around, because you don't want to put pressure on these curves, or you'll stretch them out. Okay. So here we go. Lost my center pin. I guess this fabric is so slick it let it come out. But you can see this is where I started sewing, and I'm going to stop sewing back here. Okay, so that gives me a little gap. And let me show you what we're going to do here. I'm going to take it off the machine. And actually, I'm going to find my center back again, so bear with me 1 second. I've got my center back, and actually I stitched right up on it. I should have stopped a little further back. So when it's you, stop about 1 inch or 2 before you get to that center back pin. I didn't do that, but it's still going to work out fine. because what we're going to do is this is where I'm going to want this binding to meet up with this one, if that makes sense. So I'll fold that over, and I can see that if I put me a pin right here, I can see that if I were to sew this binding together, just only the binding part now, sew this binding together, that then when I lay it back down on here, it's going to be the right length, and then my seam on here is going to match up with the center back of my garment. Okay, I hope that all makes sense. So that's where I want to stitch my binding. So I'm going to move the shirt out of the way, and I'm going to pull the binding. That's why you shouldn't stitch all the way up to your center back, because this is like tedious now. But if hopefully you learned from me not paying attention and stopped, and that's going to give you more room right here to get the shirt back out of the way without stitching it. But I've got like a little bit of space, so I'll be okay. So this is where I want my binding seam to be, so it falls at the center back. So I'm just going to stitch a straight stitch across here. Okay, and then I'm going to trim this excess off. Right there like that. Get that out of here. And then I'm going to go back into the same position that I was. And I'm going to start, that's where I stopped sewing. So I'm going to back up just a little bit, because you should be further back. Then I'm going to press, oh, my little fingers are shaking. I don't know why I keep shaking like that now. I have some nerve issues, guys, in my back, and that could be, because I'm not shaking. Oh, yep, it is. Look at it. Ugh. I'm like trying to touch something and my fingers like going nuts. All right, here we go. So press your little seam open, and we are going to again make sure our raw edges here are lined up, and we're just going to connect from where we started sewing, where we stopped sewing, all the way up to where we started sewing. Okay, and now you can see how neat your binding is, where it matches up. And again, this is going to be the center back of your shirt, so you're going to have this seam right at the center back. How awesome is that? All right, so you should have your binding sewn around your neck, and we're going to treat this just like we did the lower hemband, just like we did the sleeves, in the sense that I am going to press this seam allowance up towards the binding all the way around. I mean, I'm not going to do that here because that's probably going to be kind of boring for you to watch, but I'm going to open this, make sure that seam's pressed open also. But I'm going to press this up all the way around, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold the binding back towards the right side, over just 1/4 inch over that stitch line, like so, and pin it down. Okay, so you're going to want to do that all the way around the neckline. All right, so once you're pinned down, you should look something like this. I've turned it back right side out because that's again going to help me. I'm going to slide this up under the machine, and I'm going to stitch from the back side, zigzag. Remember to zigzag right along this line, which is going to tack our binding down. Okay, so we are going to go take that to the machine, get that sewn down. All right, I'm all lined up and ready to go. And again, remember to use a zigzag stitch here. And I'm just starting at the, well, I'm not actually on the center back, am I? But I'm right here by the center back. But you can start anywhere you want because you're going to go all the way around. Let's go. And there you have it. Your Tallulah top is complete. Do you know what time it is? Now it's time to clear your table, throw your shirt on, and let's have a dance party. No. Okay, I'll spare you that. Anyway, so there's your shirt done, and this is your shirt once you wash it. I hope you like this tutorial. I hope you enjoy your kits. I hope you all make wonderful Tallulah tops. I will be making more kits like this using the Tallulah pattern, only with different prints. I haven't decided fully what prints I'm going to put on some of them, but I'll be offering more in the future. So if you buy one of the other kits and you're directed to this video, you're going to be doing the same thing, only with a different image. So come back and let's see what other ones we can make. Take care, you guys. Thank you so much. I appreciate all of you.